The moment I stepped into the attic, I felt a chill slither down my spine. It wasn't the cold that hit me, but a weight of darkness that seemed to hang in the air, thick and suffocating. I had only come up to grab some old boxes, but the moment I pulled the latch open, it felt like I had awakened something that had been sleeping for far too long. It was late November 2021 when I finally decided to tackle the attic. My parents had left their old house to me after they moved out, and I had been avoiding the upstairs ever since I moved in last year. With the winter holidays approaching, I thought I could salvage some decorations hidden beneath layers of dust and time. My heart raced as I climbed the rickety ladder, each step creaking ominously under my weight. As the hatch swung open, a gust of stale air enveloped me. The light from the bulb flickered to life, casting strange shadows across the piles of forgotten junk. Old furniture, boxes crammed with memories, and remnants of childhood dreams filled the space. I sighed, kicked off a half-empty box of broken ornaments, and got to work looking for the holiday spirit buried within this eerie collection. Hours passed as I rummaged through the clutter. I came across a dusty trunk that I hadn't noticed before, wedged between a dilapidated desk and a pile of tattered blankets. Instinctively, I felt drawn to it, like it was calling my name. The trunk was locked, the kind of lock made for secrets. My curiosity piqued as I wondered what lay inside, something precious, or perhaps something better left hidden. Using a screwdriver I found nearby, I pried it open. The rusty metal screeched in protest, making my skin crawl. Inside, the trunk contained a collection of yellowing papers and photographs, all of which hinted at a life once full of laughter. As I thumbed through them, my heart sank. These were pictures of a young girl smiling brightly in a garden, her eyes full of life. Who was she? The name written on the back of the largest photo read, Maggie, 1985. My thoughts swirled as unease settled in. Suddenly, a soft thump echoed behind me. I whipped around, my stomach dropping. The attic was still, just the echoes of the past swirling in the air, noisily interrupting the silence. I shook my head, convincing myself it was nothing but a figment of my imagination. After all, I was alone here. But deep down, I felt eyes watching me, hidden behind the shadows. Perhaps it was my growing discomfort, the weight of that trunk in my hands, or the realization that I was trespassing on memories long gone. Either way, I felt a compulsion to leave, to shut the trunk and forget I ever found it. But as I turned to the ladder ready to escape, a low whisper echoed through the attic. The voice was faint, almost childlike, and what it said struck me cold. Help me. The sound froze me in place. My instinct was to flee, to run and never look back. But I couldn't. I had to know what was happening. Who was this girl in the photographs, and why did it feel like something dark had been awakened? I turned back, heart pounding, and examined the trunk again. Something compelled me to dig deeper, to search for any clues or signs about Maggie's life. After what felt like an eternity, I unearthed a small, tattered journal tucked inside the trunk. The pages were fragile, yellowed with age, and as I opened to the first entry, it read, "I wish they would remember me." I felt my throat tighten as I read on. The journal chronicled Maggie's life, tales of her hopes and dreams, but the entries grew darker, culminating in the heart-wrenching final words. "They locked me in here when they left. I'm still waiting." Then, the attic lights flickered wildly, casting elongated shadows across the walls. My pulse quickened as I realized that the whispers had transformed into pleading cries. "Please help me." They echoed louder now, reverberating around the attic, filling my ears with desperate sorrow. I could feel fear clutching at my chest, urging me to leave, to escape this haunted space. But I was frozen in a vision of the girl's face. Those bright eyes turned dark as they reached out from the abyss. The air grew thick with dread, and I stumbled backward, knocking over a box of old Christmas lights. The sound resonated in the silence, but even that seemed to drown beneath the mounting cries of Maggie. I turned to flee, the knot of fear tightening around my throat. But as I took a step, I felt an icy grip on my wrist. I whipped around, and there was nothing behind me, yet it felt as if the very darkness was alive, feeding off my fear. I sprinted toward the hatch, desperate to escape the suffocating shadows. As I fumbled to close the trunk, I noticed a final photo slip from its pages, a picture of a girl standing in front of the house, her expression twisted in fear. It felt as if she was warning me, telling me to leave this place. I could almost feel her presence as I slammed the hatch shut and raced down the ladder. I didn't stop until I was downstairs where the comfort of sunlight flooded through the windows, but the whispers didn't cease. They followed me into the light, clawing at my mind, echoing endlessly in my ears, refusing to be silenced. I avoided the attic after that, barricading the hatch and trying to forget Maggie and her plea. Weeks passed, and it was almost Christmas. I tried to push the memory of that dreadful day aside, preparing instead for family gatherings and festive cheer. Yet every time I walked past the attic door, I felt an agonizing pull, a gnawing sensation that wouldn't let me rest. I could hear her soft calling, begging me to remember her as if she was still trapped in that trunk, waiting for acknowledgement. And then there was a night when everything changed. I awoke, drenched in cold sweat, and the whispers were louder this time, almost panicked. I glanced at the clock, the glow showing 3 a.m. My heart raced as I climbed out of bed, compelled to resolve the haunting. I tiptoed down the hall toward the attic, feeling a weight on my chest as I pulled the hatch open once more. Maybe this will end it, I thought, my voice trembling in the darkness. As I ascended the ladder, the shadows enveloped me once more. The light flickered, and the air grew even colder. The trunk, still open, beckoned me, taunting me with the secrets it held. I found myself standing in front of it, the cries of Maggie echoing in my mind, urging me to uncover the truth. I fumbled for the journal and began to read her entries aloud, determined to give her a voice. But as I read, the whispers transformed into a loud cacophony, screaming in anguish. I felt the energy in the room shift. It was as if I had opened a portal to her suffering. I looked down and saw the shadows pooling from the corners, swirling around my feet like a living entity. Just as I was ready to flee, I heard a voice, clear as day, right next to my ear. "I'm still here." I turned, and in an instant, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, covered in dust and sweat. The attic was silent, the trunk closed. I scrambled to my feet, panic racing through me. What had just happened? I stumbled back toward the ladder, but as I looked back one last time, I swore I saw a shadowy figure lingering by the trunk. I raced down the steps, my heart pounding as the whispers faded into the darkness behind me. Now, I keep the attic door barricaded. The whispers quieted, but never silenced. I can still occasionally hear Maggie's pleas reverberating in my mind, a haunting reminder that some doors should remain closed. Even in the brightness of daylight, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not the only one in that old house. What truly lies in that attic I may never know, but I hear her voice still, a chilling echo that lingers in the corners of my mind. The scratching sound above me was relentless, like nails clawing against the wood. It was a late night in early October, the air outside crisp and filled with the scent of falling leaves. I had just settled down to sleep when the noise began. I could hear it growing louder with each passing minute, like something or someone was trying to break through the ceiling. I sighed heavily, pulling the blankets tighter around me. The house I rented was old, built in the 1920s, with creaky floors and drafty windows. My friends often joked about the ghosts that might haunt it, but I had never believed in such things. However, at that moment, as the scratching grew more frantic, I began to doubt my skepticism. There seemed to be something ominous lurking just out of my sight, something I hadn't noticed before. Determined to put an end to the noise, I threw the covers aside and tiptoed cautiously down the hallway. The wooden floorboards groaned under my weight, amplifying my anxiety with every step. I reached the attic door, its handle cold and warped from age. I hesitated, a strange instinct telling me to turn back, but the scratching persisted, drawing me closer as if it craved my attention. With a deep breath, I turned the handle and pulled the door open. A wave of musty air rushed out, making me recoil slightly. The light switch flickered hesitantly before casting a dim, eerie glow across the cluttered space. Old boxes, a forgotten armchair, and a broken lamp were piled haphazardly, forming a barrier between me and whatever was lurking above. As I stepped inside, the scratching noise ceased. An unsettling stillness enveloped me, and for a moment I felt like I was stepping into a time capsule of forgotten memories. Dust particles danced in the air, illuminated by the light, and I glanced around nervously, half expecting to see something emerge from the shadows. There was no sign of life, just the fragments of stories long abandoned. I began to explore, shifting aside boxes and old knickknacks, searching for the source of the noise. An old trunk caught my eye, its leather worn and cracked. I knelt beside it, the surface cold beneath my fingertips. Should I open it? Something inside me urged me to know what lay within, like a moth drawn to a flame. I unlatched it slowly, anticipation twisting my stomach. Inside I found faded photographs and letters, remnants of a life lived long ago. But what unsettled me was a stuffed bear, its fur matted and eyes dull, staring lifelessly back at me. Its presence felt heavy, as if it had absorbed the sorrow and secrets of its past. I picked it up, and suddenly a chill swept through the attic, sending shivers down my spine. I could have sworn I felt a breath against my neck. I dropped the bear as if it had burned me, backing away toward the ladder. But before I could retreat, the scratching returned louder than before. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it. I glanced back at the trunk, the unsettling feeling growing inside me. Would I find something horrifying waiting for me if I opened it again? Just then, an old broken mirror caught my eye, leaning precariously against the wall. I stepped toward it, curiosity overcoming my fear. As I looked into the cracked glass, my reflection flickered momentarily, replaced by a shadowy figure standing behind me. I jerked around, but there was nothing there, only the dark expanse of the attic, and the rippling shadows playing tricks on my mind. The scratching escalated once more, but this time, It was accompanied by whispers, soft and unintelligible. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I felt a presence looming closer. The attic seemed to pulse with an energy that sent icy fingers crawling up my spine. In that moment, I understood that I had crossed a threshold, trespassing into something that was never meant for my eyes. Without thinking, I bolted for the ladder, but the whispers grew louder, as if protesting my escape. "Stay with us," they beckoned, a chorus of lost souls intertwining in a sinister harmony. I stumbled, but regained my balance, scrambling down the rickety steps. I could almost feel the shadows reaching out for me as I slammed the attic door shut behind me, sealing whatever it was within those walls. The next few weeks were filled with paranoia. I locked the attic door, but I could still hear the faintest scratching against the wood, a reminder of what lay above. It became unbearable, the need to know gnawing at my sanity. One night, with the wind howling outside, I finally caved. I had to confront my fears and discover the truth once and for all. Armed with a flashlight and shaking hands, I climbed back up to the attic. The light flickered ominously again as I opened the door and stepped into the darkness. I could feel the air change thickening around me, and I knew this was a place of secrets. I approached the trunk, my heart hammering as I reopened it. To my horror, the bear was gone. The trunk was empty except for the photographs, the smiling faces of children growing up, living their lives, and then there it was again, the scratching. But now it sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. I felt faint, lightheaded as the realization struck me. Whatever had once inhabited this attic was not merely an echo. It was something far more sinister, something alive. I backed away slowly, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but I was caught in a trance. The mirror glimmered in the dim light, and as I took a last glance, I caught a glimpse of the shadow again. But this time, it was clearer, a child's outline, pleading and sorrowful. I felt tears sting my eyes as I realized these lost souls were trapped, seeking freedom that never came. In that moment, the whispers crescendoed into a wail, surrounding me, drowning out my thoughts. I stumbled back toward the ladder, the shadows swirling around me like a storm. Just as I was about to make my descent, the attic light flickered and went out completely, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in, and I could hear the whispers transforming into frantic screams, echoing through the empty space. I didn't care anymore. I shot down the ladder, practically tripping over my own feet. I slammed the door shut behind me and dropped to the floor, my heart racing. The scratching had stopped. The whispers faded to a haunting silence, but I knew they were still there, trapped in the attic's dark embrace. I tried to forget, but the scratching would return at night, an endless reminder that some doors should never be opened. The moment I stepped into the attic, I felt like I was being watched. It was a late summer evening in August 2023. And the last light of the sun barely illuminated the cramped space. As I ventured up the ladder, the musty smell of years of neglect hit me, and I could feel the temperature drop several degrees. An unsettling feeling settled in the pit of my stomach as I scanned the dark corners, and I could have sworn there were eyes peering at me from the shadows. I had decided to clean out the attic after months of putting it off, fueled by a desire to find the old family photo albums. The house had been in my family for generations, and while I had many fond memories, this attic always unnerved me. The late afternoon sun made the dust motes dance in the air, but all I could focus on were the unsettling sounds, the faint creaks and groans of the wood beneath me. It felt like the house was alive, breathing, and observing my every move. I grabbed a flashlight from a nearby box and flicked it on, illuminating the dense cobwebs hanging like veils from the rafters. As I stepped further in, the beams cast eerie shadows on the walls, creating an impression of flickering figures in the dim light. The old wooden floor creaked beneath my weight, echoing my anxiety back to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was lurking just out of sight, watching me with undivided attention. With every box I opened, a wave of nostalgia washed over me, but it was tinged with an odd feeling of dread. I found forgotten toys, faded clothes, and even a record player with a stack of vinyl records, each one holding its own story. Yet the more I unearthed, the more I felt an inexplicable presence surrounding me. The sensation was palpable, like being in a crowded room but with no one else there. I glanced back toward the entrance, half tempted to leave. Yet curiosity drove me deeper into the attic's heart. Then something caught my eye, a framed photo half buried under a pile of old linens. As I dusted it off, a chill crept down my spine. It was a picture of my grandmother and her siblings in front of the same house, each of them smiling, but what struck me was the figure standing behind them, an indistinct shape lurking just beyond the porch, barely visible, but undeniably there. I felt a jolt of electricity surge through me as I realized instinctively that this was not just an ordinary photo. It was a warning. As I turned to place the photo back, I heard what sounded like footsteps above me. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I edged toward the staircase, reluctantly peering up into the dark recesses of the attic. "Hello," I called out, my voice wavering in the air. For a moment, all I heard was silence, heavy and foreboding. I felt small in that cavernous space, and the realization struck me that if there was someone or something up there, I was utterly alone. I turned to leave, but the attic door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. Panic surged within me as I grasped the doorknob, only to find it stuck. I pulled harder, desperation fueling my actions, but it wouldn't budge. I felt the temperature drop dramatically, making it hard to breathe. In that moment, I understood. Whatever was up here did not want me to leave. It was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. With nothing left to lose, I turned back toward the darkness and called out again, "Who's there?" My voice echoed, swallowed by the musty air. Then I heard it, a soft whisper riding the chilly breeze that swept through the attic. "Stay," it urged, a voice that was neither male nor female but filled with a chilling urgency. I felt my heart race, tension coiling in my chest as if to cut off my breath. This was not a mere trick of the mind. Something was here, and it was hungry for my attention. Desperation surged within me as I rushed toward the nearest window, hoping to escape through it, but it was nailed shut, like the house was intent on keeping me inside. The air grew heavy with dread, and the whispers crescendoed, a chorus of voices wrapping around me. They seemed to swirl and dance, pulling me deeper into their tormenting embrace. I staggered back, my mind racing as I fought against the malevolent forces intent on trapping me in this attic. That's when I saw them, eyes, small glowing orbs peering at me from the corners of the attic. I gasped, my breath hitching in my throat, and blinked, willing them to disappear. But they remained, watching me intently, filled with a hunger that made my stomach drop. I felt paralyzed by their gaze, an overwhelming urge to flee battling against a creeping dread anchoring me in place. Who were they? What did they want? Then, with a sudden flash, the lights flickered back on. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that when I opened them again, the eyes would be gone. But when I looked, they were closer, more pronounced. I could feel their presence growing stronger, a sensation of cold wrapping around me as the air turned frigid. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, as if my body had betrayed me. They were not just watching, they were waiting for something. I suddenly remembered the warnings my grandmother used to tell me, stories about shadows that would follow the family through generations. I had brushed them off, convinced they were just tales meant to scare children. But standing here, suffocated by malevolence, I understood the weight of her warnings. I wasn't just being watched. I was at the center of something ancient, something powerful. Then, without warning, the shadows leaped from their corners, rushing toward me in a swirling mass. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat as I threw myself against the door, but it wouldn't open. I felt their cold claws wrap around my ankles, dragging me down into the abyss that awaited me. I fought and struggled, but the darkness swirled around, enveloping me in its embrace, the voices screaming, "Stay with us." Just as I thought I'd disappear into the depths of despair, the door swung open, and I tumbled out, gasping for air. I landed in the hallway, the attic door swinging shut behind me as if nothing had happened. I lay there, trembling, heart racing, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. The house was silent now, but the feeling of being watched remained, a shadow lingering just out of sight. I barricaded the attic door that night, my heart still pounding in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was all a figment of my imagination,